Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Udayan. I consider myself a veteran in the publishing industry, as are several people in the audience here. Ravi Singh is sitting right in the front row. I joined publishing in 1997. But Mr. Balan has been there for decades more. In the 1980s, I think, early 1980s, and he's had a long career with Oxford University Press and then with Ratnasagar, still remains actively involved with the world of books and publishing. As you can see, I mean, we're at the blue couch.
To be color coordinated.
Yeah, so we had to wear blue.
Blue room.
We had the blue background as well. We couldn't bring you blue skies. I'm sorry for that. Not everything is under our control, but we do our best. Mr. Balan, I wanted to start with 1980s, not a time that I was personally familiar with about the world of publishing at that time.
Yes.
What was it like?
Yes. Well, I think a lot of, when you join an organization, I think it's basically the people who work there that define the organization. And more particularly, it is your boss who actually is the symbol of the organization. And a lot of your working, your longevity in the organization is spent with number of hours that you and how you get on with your boss. And as they say, people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. So I was fortunate that in the early 80s or mid-80s, I joined Oxford University Press. It was headed by perhaps a publisher par excellence, a great person in the publishing world, a legend of whom I have a chapter in this book, called Ravi Dayal. And I'll just give two examples of his kind of prowess in the publishing world. One was a story that I did not know that was told to me. And the other is, of course, a story that I personally know. In the mid-80s, you see, we used to work in the YMCA library building and we used to get lunch served there and in the pantry because there was no kitchen. Kitchen was at Daryaganj. So we used to get this food and all of us would line up. I mean, senior, junior, intermediate, whatever. And Ravi would line up, Ravi Dayal would line up. Oh, all my life seemed to be full of Ravis this time. But he'll line up and take food. And then we were all sitting in one room, just two or three of us, Rukun, Advani, myself, possibly R.K. Jain, and Ravi still. And then he came there, and this is, mind you, 1986, if I can put a year, or maybe end of 1985. And then he comes there, and then you will not believe this. He is taking, have you chaps heard of a guy called Vikram Seth? Yes. Rukun looked at me. I looked at Rukun. Neither of us has heard of Vikram Seth.
This is of course in the 1980s. I mean, long before Suitable was.
But you see, Vikram at that time had just published The Golden Gate, a novel in verse which was published in the US by Random House and by UK by Bloomsbury, I think. No, sorry, by Faber. I'm so sorry. Faber. How could I forget that? Because Faber is the story. Now, we represented Faber at that time in India, and Ravi had actually received advance copies of the book. And Ravi said, this guy writes novel in verse like Onegin, reads very nice and, looks nice. So I said, Ravi, do you have copies of the book? He said, yeah, two are lying in my room. And I said, why don't you read? And Ravi put his plate away and went to his room, and then he read. Ravi is a wonderful reader of poetry. He electrified us, and on the spot we decided to order 500 copies, which is high for Fable. And then we ordered one more smaller quantity and then decided to reprint, So in many ways, I mean, both you and Ravi are ex-Penguin, and sometimes I always feel that this fact is a little forgotten in publishing history, that Oxford University Press published Vikram Seth, The Golden Gate, and a second book called The Humble Administrator's Garden. And I always thought those were the first, published, but Renuka Chatterjee actually off Speaking Tiger corrected me to say that Ravi was first published by Writer's Workshop. P. Lal had first published him.
The first book called Mappings.
That was the first anecdote that I wanted to say. And when I wrote an account of this, and I particularly published it in Hindustan Times, which a paper I normally do not write for, but I wanted the trade to read, a stalwart of the trade and somebody that all of us know, Narendra Kumar. Right. He traced my number and he rang me up. What a wonderful story. This is why we are all in publishing. I'm not sure Narendra Kumar was in publishing for those reasons. Anyway, the second story was one that was related by Karan Singh, Dr. Karan Singh. His autobiography was published by us. And it's always dicey to give your manuscript to Ravi to edit, Where Ravi, as all Ravis, do, they keep on scoring out stuff and all that. So Karan Singh had made a trip to Europe, and he had occasion to meet Helen Keller. And Helen Keller sensed his presence and beckoned him closer. And for this, if you don't mind, I will demonstrate standing up, and I'll take my glasses off. She beckoned him closer, come closer, because she was visually challenged, she couldn't see. And she took the palm of her right hand and ran it over his face from forehead to chin. At the end, she said, handsome. Now, Karan Singh was obviously, it's not given to many people to get a beautiful lady come right up to you and run her hand from forehead to chin. I have not had the fortune so far. And Karan Singh put it in the manuscript, And Ravi Dayal took out his red pen, scored it out, and in parentheses, in margins, he wrote, presumptuous. And this was related by Karan Singh at the Indian Center when we were remembering Ravi. Ravi had just passed away in 2006. And he could not reinstate. He was the Minister for Tourism and Civil Aviation, and he could not reinstate that. Later on, I wrote to Karan Singh to say that in that entire room, the entire audience did not believe that Helen Keller was wrong. Dr. Helen Keller was wrong. You are indeed handsome. But whether it should be in the pages. And later on, Karan Singh had the last word. He included that incident in another book. Yeah, he told me that, and then told me.
Great. It's often said that two events changed English language publishing in India completely. One was The God of Small Things winning the Booker in 1997. And the second event, perhaps less celebrated, is the publication and overnight an immense success of 5 Point Someone by Chetan Bhagat in 2004. These things had different kinds of impact, obviously. One was a literary masterpiece. The other book reached out to a segment of the readership in the English language that, it is said, had not been reached out to before. This was followed, of course, in 2010 by the publication of The Immortals of Meluha, Amish. Would you say these are landmark events? That is not my real question. My real question is, has English language publishing evolved in India over the last 25, 30 years? If so, how so? And if not, then how are things the same?
See, if we look at origins or the etymology of English education itself, after Lord Macaulay's famous Minute on Education, 1835, where he prescribed that English should be the medium of instruction, foreign publishers, English publishers sensed that there was a market for English books in India, and that's how the colonial and home office libraries actually started. Macmillan was at the forefront, John Murray, and so on. And slowly, an Indian elite growing. There was an English resident class in India, and then there was this Indian, coming up now, who were benefit of education, and they started reading. So in that sense, and so that is how the, and we actually have now, we published a book from the OUP where we have actually delved into library records to see which were the ones. And if you see, the first three authors were actually G.W. Reynolds, H. Rider Haggard, and G.A. Henty. Yeah. Rider Haggard is still known because of King Solomon's Wines.
Yeah,
but not,
which you talk about in Off the Shelf.
Yeah.
If you haven't read Off the Shelf, please, borrowing your copy for a second, please read this book. It was published about 3 years ago by Speaking Tiger. You will get insights into the publishing industry that you will not get anywhere else. Please go on.
This thing about Arundhati's book was that when I read it, I sensed the visual imagery, which was very striking. And I always wondered why a visual, this thing was not made, film was not made. I said it almost as much in one of my columns. But as far as Chetan Bhagat's column, there are 2-3 things that you must keep in mind, that in publishing, while you may decide, on the content and, author, editor, dialogue, and you may change, and you may have a little bit of say on the cover design, it's discussed. But there's one thing that is sacrosanct, in which normally speaking, the author shall not interfere. And that is what will be the published price of that book. Because the published price of the book is a purely publisher's decision based on the marketing and really based, of course, loosely based on the costing we do and the text and so on and so forth, and a sense of what the market can take, but more often than not, determined by the discounts that the publisher has to give. Now, Chetan Bhagat was one of the few publishers in his discussions with Rupa, he fixed the price point of the book, the earlier book. So Rupa published it at that, and they could withstand that because the unit cost had come down because of the very large print run. Two things happened. One, there was compromise in production quality. I have absolutely no hesitation to say that.
I fully agree,
Yeah.
yes.
The second was, Udayan, that you now had this humongous bulk of books. Whatever may be Rupa's expertise in distribution, you still had to sell unit sales. So there they worked on that unique marketing strategy, a promotion strategy, where they worked on tier 2 and cities, and they managed to get, so here you had a nascent English-speaking class, which also accessed the book. But the third thing, which is also very important, when you come later to the other, and the price point didn't prevail, it started getting priced according to market. But it was one of those few books which many of you may not remember, but at departmental stores like West Side and Marksville, it was actually heaped up in spiral behind the cash counter. It was an item for impulse purchase. You looked around, maybe you're not too happy with your shirt, but you're very happy with getting a copy of Chetan Bhagat. And so, therefore, each one according to his size. I guess one size fits all. So he started selling in those kind of quantities. But one thing I will tell you, regardless of how many of you are Chetan Bhagat bhakts, let me say that with the quality that the books were first produced, they were like, you read it once. And that's it, I don't know how many people keep Chetan Bhagat in the library. Please raise your hands in your home library.
No, Mr. Balan, I think one of the things is, when paperback publishing started, and, Penguin started it, Alan Lane started it, the idea was that these were supposed to be disposable, as opposed to the hardbacks. So the hardbacks were to be, were for keeps, paperbacks you read and throw, or you read on the train or flight, very few flights at that time, but anyway, and you just leave it behind on your transport medium. That the concept didn't come into India very soon. I mean, paperbacks used to be published, many of them again by Penguin, of very good production quality, which people keep. Some of those have, sustained over decades. Chetan Bhagat, you're very right. I mean, I think this concept came from him. I don't know the exact sort of equations that would have happened in discussions with the sales and marketing departments, but the product pricing definitely came from him. The model of making it available in, supermarkets, which is an American model. In every American supermarket, you'll find books. But in India, that was not the case. And so that immediately exponentially expanded the potential market. So I wanted to come to a related question sorry, please.
For a minute,
yeah, please,
just a little bit on paperbacks.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question on paperbacks. When you look at the international evolution, of course, we have that story. It is true, it's not apocryphal, that he had gone to see Agatha Christie, Alan Lane, and got on at Exeter, and he wanted to pick up a paperback and didn't find any reading matter. And there were actually cigarettes that were more plentifully available, and he said, why can't I make paperbacks as plentiful? But what is very important is that started the revolution. But if you actually look, they became what is called the mass market paperback. And when you actually look at those, and please try and see if you can lay your hands on copies, because there were articles for mass market and mass consumption, many of the paperbacks carried advertisements. Yes. They carried advertisements of products. It could be soup tablets, it could be a washing machine, it could be a bicycle, or whatever. That is, people use it for, and that was a medium. Can you imagine exploring that? There were 2-3 reasons. One, that they wanted to get paperbacks to everyone's home. They were being sold everywhere. And apart from that, there was also 1930s that you had, and then you entered into the war years. It was part of issue to every soldier. Every soldier. And in fact, I have looked at this in some detail, and I'm hoping at some stage I might persuade Ravi to publish something. But we had a paperback to fit actually the army soldier's jacket, and so, or back pocket. And so, if you had your jacket, and it bulged a little, it did not mean you held a gun. What you had was a paperback. You know, and so they used to read this, and we have an instance even slightly earlier even than Alan Lane of the First World War, where a paperback in the breast pocket saved a soldier's life. Actually, he was shot, this American the French soldier of the French region, he was actually shot, and it was the last 20 pages of that book which stopped the bullet. He was knocked unconscious. We have, and what was that book? So interesting for you all. It was Rudyard Kipling's Kim. Wow. And there are French edition. We have that book preserved in the Library of Congress. Bullet, mercifully, is not there.
Yeah.
And you have the hall, and actually he got the Legion d'Honneur. He got a French medal. And then there's an amazing correspondence between that French soldier, Marceau Harmonot, along with Harmonot, along with Rudyard Kipling. It's fascinating. But coming back, so that was the reason how a paperback. But I must tell you, paperback, of course, the other thing was that Penguin and our late colleague Zamir Ansari, who was another legend in publishing, masterminded the visibility in bookshops. So bookshops, Penguin was visible. And then, the popularity was such, you had two editions, the black and the popular one, popular classic. When Oxford University Press decided to launch a paperbacks list, it was called the Oxford India Paperbacks, we had that launch at Claridge's Hotel. David Davida rang me up to say, could he come? Karthika rang me. Quite a few people wanted to come. So I said, David, of course, you're welcome, but it's not the paperbacks of the time that you have, because we did a lot of the academic books, and I remember I had visualized that, and we had a great catalog and so on. But those took on a life of their own, and suddenly what happens is when you're commissioning, you do not necessarily always commission hardback to convert paperback. Sometimes there are certain books that you look at commissioning into paperback.
Directly into paperback, of course. Yes.
And that is the revolution, and so this was also published.
Exactly. Now a lot of books are, so yeah. One of the things that anybody who's part of the publishing industry continues to despair about, and I just wanted your views on this because you've been part of the industry for so long, is that we are a country of 1.4 billion people. And I joined the industry 26 years ago. At that time, the standard print run of a book was 2,000 copies. That has, over 25 years, it has become 4,000 copies, 3,000 in some cases. The standard price of a book used to be $199 at that point. Chetan Bhagat went and underpriced it. The price of a paperback has now risen to $399. The market does not seem to be expanding. Amish Tripathi, Chetan Bhagat, some other authors in the commercial space are exceptions. Let's not go by exceptions. What is the future like? I mean, are we ever going to actually hit a point where at least 1% of our population buys books?
Yes. This is actually a very, very interesting question. Some work is actually going on this front. You see, we used to have, when we used to publish in paperback, we had a notional price of absolute ceiling on what the price should be. I mean, that is being, now paperbacks are being priced almost at what the older hardbacks used to be priced at. We are having paperbacks and so on. I just bought Abraham Verghese book, which is at $8.99, The Covenant of Water. But so we are pricing, but partly, as I said, there is a factor. One is, of course, the cost because everything is going up. In fact, it's a very strange situation. Paper price has been relatively stable, but machining costs have gone up now, and we actually have to revise costing for our own books. But one thing that has to be, I think, kept in mind is that whether we are actually selling more copies. This is actually, actually the question is this, that what is the percentage, that you want to make so many million and so on. Now, we are actually, a lot of steps are being done. I mean, it has to call for a work at a societal level all over,
Exactly.
Yeah, I have been, for last 15 years, not many people know, there's a chapter on that. I take a program to promote reading habit among children in schools. I've been going around like a madman all over the country, crisscrossing to reading habit. Now, I actually, strangely, not many people would know, I actually speak to teachers. And I use teachers as catalysts, but I do speak to children if necessary. Now, what is, I think, important is that we have, but we also as publishers need to outreach. We need to go out and, even things like, for example, we can have designers who design or make a covers, you can have a lovely story on that. And you can have children. We had a children's session, earlier when they were there. And the other is that you try and give them, the kind of stories that they want. But also in our promotion, is it possible for us, for our authors, or to have somebody enact stories? In the classroom, revelation. There was something happening yesterday in the children's literature thing. So if we do that, I must tell you from Ratnasagar, we had Faisal Al-Qazi, poetry, and he put it to action. Right. And he did it in a classroom, And I was talking to him the other day in the Speaking Tiger launch, and he said, what a wonderful, program it was, because it was interactive. So I think slowly we need to do that. We also have the Bukaru in Delhi, which is totally focused on children, and we do that, and we try and get children to interact, at least the one in which I was a panel speaker some years ago. And apart from that, we also have Kataka, where we have storytelling tradition. Now we have international. So we are also using props. So there was a storytelling session with something called a digidiru. Later on, I understood that it's a wind instrument, music can, you do that. Now, that to my mind, so a lot of children look for that. We are also designing the way we are doing. We're making interactive, not only is the visually attractive, but let me also tell you the flip side, textbooks for children. Please do not think that they are the textbooks of yours. Today, we are actually using both VR and AR features. We are using 3D and 4D dimensions to actually we have a sensor, and then we use a mobile phone to scan that. You play that page back, that visual comes alive on your phone. So this is, so you go to get that. That is as far as children and kids are concerned. But I think that we need to do. In fact, there is this Kunzum chain of bookstores in Delhi. It's becoming very active. The Costa, the coffee people had come. They have something like 140, 150. They're going to scale up to 500 stores in northern India alone. And they are saying many of these stores will become book cafes. If we start having that, then we are going to reach some critical mass. But at the same time, every effort has to be made to increase unit sales. At the end of the day, if our friend Atagalata is not going to be able to sell books there,
that's the bottom line, as they say. Really, I mean, if we are not able to, I don't think I don't think we can overstress that point. That is really critical. I mean, all kinds of efforts and initiatives are being undertaken. Technology, as Mr. Balan said, has really improved, and that helps. But you talk a fair bit in the later chapters of the book. You talk about the magical space that is libraries and the magical space that's a physical bookstore. And since this festival is also, Atagalata is one of the principal participants and sponsors of the festival. I wanted you to talk a little bit, and I think that's the last question. We have 3 minutes exactly, so and they want to close on time, so we'll do that. What are these spaces? Why are these spaces so special? And these spaces have started shrinking. Your thoughts on that?
Thank you so much, Udayan. I must say something in favor of Bengaluru. We come from Delhi. Delhi is also Delhi, and so on. Delhi remains a publisher's hub, right? All the main publishers' offices are in Delhi, NCR.
Yeah, for some reason, we don't know why, but
we'll not go into that, but that's called for another session. But Bengaluru, if I have to say, it's a really book selling, book marketing, and reading. And there is no doubt. You will be surprised at the number of people I met who have bookshops in this audience, including children's bookshops, by the way. So that, I think, is very, very important. We are having a situation where we need to get, people reading more. And I think one of the things that I have a friend called Lynn Scanlon from New York, and she's called the Wicked Witch of Publishing, Self-Style. And she said, once she wrote to me, and she said, where are the ivory, where is the, hand sellers? She said, as they are as rare as the ivory or hornbill of Arkansas. So I have never been to Arkansas. Right. Bill Clinton never called me to Little Rock. But I said they are perhaps as rare, and the only rare bird I could find, looking up my Salim Ali, was the Tragopan in Nagaland. So I said they are as rare. Basically, when you go to a bookshop, the subject experience, how many hand sellers are there who really are able to tell you, we need to have some kind of this thing that most of our booksellers on the shop front are people, they're trained to be receptive. I mean, they will actually look up the computer. See, and so she actually says, and I'll end with this, it's a humorous note, she goes into one of the Barnes & Noble store in Queens, and she wants to ask for a particular book on the Vietnam War. Right. The person tells her straight away, I do not think we have it in stock. However, I will check. She goes and checks, and but it is available in the next Barnes & Noble store, maybe in Manhattan or whatever. She says, I will have it. She said, don't worry, don't bother. I will be traveling up town, and then I will pick it up. Right. And she leaves. Yeah. After a week or 10 days, she comes back to that area and comes back to the store. And there is another sales girl, and she beckons her. Right. And she says, we have something for you. But she had said, and then on the shelf below was this book. Right. This other salesperson had sourced it, put a slip in it, and said, for tall woman with dark tan. She had no idea of her name, and so she kept it. And this lady remembered that, thought it fit enough to write to me. And I think that is what book selling is all about, that we need to develop those relationships as we need to develop, authors need to develop relationships with their readers. Thank you so much.
Well said, sir. Thank you, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.